Okay, good morning. Thanks everybody for joining. For those that don't know me, I'm Darren Hartley. I'm Chief Exec of TAROE Trust. Today's session is going to be a kind of a slightly different one. So we do quite a lot of webinars and things, but today's going to be hopefully a much more interactive session. It's going to have the opportunity for people to kind of get to meet each other as well. We're going to be exploring the subject of tenant scrutiny. What I'll do, I'll set the scene a little bit in a moment. I've got a few slides, but it's really, I promise you, it's not just going to be me doing lots of talking. In fact, if we did, then that's going to be a complete failure, because the intention is really for you to be able to bring something to this session about your experiences of scrutiny, and then for that to be shared and to be contrasted with other people's. And hopefully this will be a kind of a rounded opportunity to learn what others are doing, to make links with others that are active in this space. And we're expecting a mix of both tenants and staff working in this area as well to be joining. Because there's quite a lot of people on the session, I'm not proposing that we will all go around and introduce each other individually at this stage. But what I would say are two things. Firstly, when you introduce yourself, maybe for the first time that you're speaking, if you could just let us know about your name, where you're from, and in what capacity you might maybe like involved. So if you're maybe a staff member, what your job title is, or if you're a tenant, if you're involved in tenant scrutiny at the moment. And that's just a good way of us to get to know the sort of background and context in which you're involved. The other thing I would say is that there's the opportunity to use the chat function. If you wanted to introduce yourself into the chat as well, please feel free to do that at any time. So maybe just like your name, where you're from, what you're involved with at a local level. If you want, because one of the opportunities for this is to kind of make contact with others. If you wanted to share your details within the chat function to do that, then feel free to do that. But I'm just kind of mindful that that means that it's in the public domain as well. So there's kind of sort of like one point of caution, just that you're willing to do that. If you're not willing to put your sort of email address into the chat function because you don't want that to be in the public domain, then I'm happy for you to for us to facilitate that as well, and for you to be able to kind of share. And so long as you say that you're happy for who it's to go to, then we can hopefully create those linkages as well. Okay, so that's all like the kind of the housekeeping. I'm now going to try and see if I can share my screen just to give a kind of a context. So you need that in presentation view. So hopefully you can all now see the screen. I can see some faces, but not as many people now. So that's always a slightly difficult disconcerting. And I also can't see the chat, but I'm not going to be keeping this up for throughout the session. It's just really for me to introduce things. So as I said, learning from scrutiny, interactive session. Context. Well, firstly, hopefully you like our new kind of look and feel. We've had a little bit of a brand refresh as well. So these slides are kind of one of the first times that we're kind of putting our new, fresher look into the public domain. And hopefully over the next few days, you'll see that if it's not already done, so we have done it in a number of platforms, that you'll see our kind of image transferred onto different platforms as well over the coming days. Okay, so a bit of background. Things called a tenant panel have become really dominant and popular for use, especially since 2010 onwards. And what I one of the kind of main reasons as to why that is the case is because within the current regulatory standards, we can see that there's an expectation in the tenant involvement and engagement standard that there's an expectation that landlords will have and engage with tenant panels. Of course, what we mean by tenant panel is not strictly defined, and different organisations have interpreted that in different ways. Tenant panel might be broader and wider than what we mean by scrutiny. So I'll come back to the kind of definitions on that in a few moments, but essentially that's not necessarily interchangeable, but in some instances, some organisations use tenant panel as interchangeable with tenant scrutiny. So just a bit of a recap on the objectives of today. Hopefully this is a kind of a safe place for you to discuss a topical issue. What we'd like to do is identify good practice areas in this area, and the ultimate intention is that from today, what we'll do is we'll look to produce a short report. It's not going to be kind of a guide to this is how you do scrutiny. It's also not going to be kind of completely, this is every stage of going through setting up and operating and reviewing the effectiveness of a scrutiny panel. It's just meant to be kind of a more focused snapshot review on that, which will hopefully give a bit of an additional insight into what different organisations and tenant groups are involved in doing at the moment. I said, hopefully it's also an opportunity for you to learn from others and for you to network. But this is not a kind of a real long presentation. It's going to be interactive. So approach and methodology. I've prepared some semi-structured, here's Ted as well. Welcome, Ted. Thanks for joining. Just doing the introduction stuff. Feel free to put your name in the chat and where you're from, what you're doing. So approach and methodology. I've prepared some semi-structured questions. In the kind of true kind of research sense, the idea is that hopefully that will channel and structure and give some prompts for discussions, but it's not meant to kind of completely shape the discussion. So it's entirely possible, those that have got involved in any of our other recent research will know it's entirely possible that we might end up going off on a tangent, but hopefully it does provide a structure for us to go through, but with that flexibility to maybe get some new insights that we haven't been aware of. So the themes that we'll talk through I've listed on the bullet points there, and hopefully we can have kind of a short discussion around each of those kind of themes which I'd identified in advance. That's generally from our experience and involvement with scrutiny panels or supporting scrutiny panels, providing training to scrutiny panels, which we do from time to time. So just a couple of reminders. We've said already about introductions and in the chat, and just like when it's the first time that you speak. Out of courtesy, I just ask if you could keep yourself on mute, largely just to avoid any kind of background noise or interference for when other people, and out of respect for other people when they're talking. What I'll try to do, because the presentation will be down, hopefully I can look, is if there is the option to put your hand up, I'll try and see who's put their hand up first. Apologies if I don't quite get that in the right order. I'll try my best to try and see who's next in line. As I said, please make use of chat as well, because we can also use that to share information afterwards. There are some publications, some of them are getting a bit dated now in this area, so we can share that afterwards as well. So I'll give some links to that afterwards to kind of more comprehensive guides around scrutiny. Please be respectful. This is going to be in the public domain, so kind of if you could avoid kind of use of expletives and things, and just be respectful to each other, like you'd want to be treated, that would be helpful. And reminder that we're recording the session. Okay, so we can share the questions if you want afterwards, but again, they're just a guide. and there'll be other information which we'll go through. We're hoping to get the Spotlight report out by the end of April, sooner if we can, but I'm aware that there's Easter coming up and year end and all that's involved in that. Afterwards, if you feel that you've not had the opportunity to kind of speak, but really wanted to showcase something, I'm happy for you to send things in, and we'll provide the details as to where to do that. Send things in and to share additional materials afterwards. Very happy for you to do so. So, okay, I'm going to stop sharing. I'm going to check because I can see that there's now been some chat questions. Just say, okay. So yeah, and definitely, as David has highlighted, big thing is going to be communications. We're not going to be able to go into depth into all of those subjects, and it may be that if no one's got a lot to talk about in particular areas, then we can quickly move on. I'd ask if you can keep your kind of contribution relatively succinct, then that gives a chance for everybody to have a chat. So, okay, let's move on. So first area, we've talked about kind of approach. So questions, recruitment. Okay, so I've got a few questions on recruitment. We'll see who wants to kick off. First question is, like, when you're getting involved in recruitment, did you find that you were already involved in other areas, or was it your first time for getting involved? And really what I'm getting at here is, do you think it's an advantage to have already had experience of being involved with your landlord in another way before getting involved in scrutiny, or do you think it's an advantage that it's the first time that you're involved and you're coming fresh to the subject? Does anyone want to kick off on that? So I'm going to have a look for hands. So Val.
Hello. I got involved due to the fact of, like everybody here would know, is repair issues. I went to a forum and I didn't like what I was hearing that they were saying. So I thought, I'm going to make a change and try and change the services that they were saying going forward. And it is a challenge sometimes, because they do give lip service, but I pull them up on it and says, I don't want lip service, I don't want tick box exercises, I want action. And it does work sometimes. You have to be firm with them.
So really driving for getting involved from yourself is the ability to make change, to be able to challenge, and that you've got to be challenging. Brian, I think your hand was up next.
Yeah, I think I've unmuted.
You are. We can hear you, Brian.
Well, a very strange way that I actually got involved was I had a local housing manager who, let's say, his attitude was more than helpful, and I'm saying that in a very sarcastic way. And that's basically what struck me, that anybody who's working for an organization where we're paying for it, to have that sort of attitude with tenants. And I wasn't very long a tenant at the time, but I think he realized he had tackled the wrong person, and that's how I started getting involved in it. And I found out that they're not, I will have to say that where I am, that they're not very encouraging for tenants to get involved in different activities and stuff like that. Yes, you know, if you want to get involved in your local a community activity, they don't even encourage that. But as regards being an involved tenant, the encouragement doesn't tend to be there. but I'm a bit, as we've discussed before, I'm a bit of an obstinate git. When something goes wrong, I will tend to keep at it until I can get a good answer. Not necessarily the right answer, but a good answer.
Yeah, so that sort of alludes to some of the characteristics that's required about grit and determination and resilience. Yeah. To kind of really keep pushing on. And again, I guess the grievance link with grievances and concerns about service just shows about it's about wanting to make a change, why people get involved. Is that your experience, Paul?
Absolutely. Like Val, I got involved because I didn't feel that as tenants we were getting, in our particular case, the reporting of complaints didn't seem to be gelling with our own experience. So I came along to what we had then as a TPG meeting, 20 of us in the room, and every time we had a meeting, once a month, which is a Tuesday evening, it felt like you were being invited for a cup of tea, being given certain choice pieces of information, given a pat on the back, and then sent on the way until the following month. What we found was in our group, out of 20, on average, there were about 4 people in the room who either had experience directly or had a neighbour who had problems with the maintenance contractor. But every month, the maintenance contractor was coming back with data that said 97.8% success rate, everybody's happy. And then after sort of 4 or 5 months of this, I'm thinking, well, this can't be happening. These figures can't be right. And so that was the start of, I started digging. But going back to, if I may, recruitment, the interesting thing is, to get this off the ground, each individual organisation would have had to have approached, generally speaking, would have approached individuals. Those individuals would be the sort of people that perhaps the landlords would like to talk with, to work with. What we actually need are people like Brian, for instance, who's prepared to kick. Now, a person who's prepared to kick isn't necessarily going to be welcomed on open arms with certain kinds of organisations. And that brings us to the issues of recruitment and demography. If we look at the people who are around the screen today, I doubt very much if we would find a majority of participants below the age of 40, for instance. Those people who are working in a full-time job, probably wouldn't, as tenants, be here for a meeting. So there's all sorts of issues with recruitment as to just simple things like, when do you have a meeting? How do you get people involved in that? So from our perspective, taking half a step back, going right back to the beginning, recruitment is so important, and you basically got to use all sorts of platforms to communicate, to get people involved.
Yeah, thanks, Brian. I mean, that definitely chimes with our experience as well about, and sometimes the criticism about whether the tenants are truly independent, whether they're cherry picked, what role and scope they have anyway to be able to influence. And then you've also touched on the issue about what barriers there might be, and certainly the time commitments involved, whether you're doing other things like you might be in work. I suppose linked to that then is the timing of the meetings when they take place, whether it's in the day and is suitable for maybe staff in work, but not for say people who are also in work. So that definitely, I can see that Jan's got a hand up. Before I hand over to Jan, I'll just ask kind of another question to start to think about the next bit, which kind of leads on from what Brian and Paul were just saying, is about do you think that the time commitment that might be involved in getting involved and committing to a scrutiny panel was made clear in advance, and is that kind of imperative? And also whether the time commitment has to be fixed or variable as well. So it's just something to give a thought to. And now I'll hand over to Jan.
Yeah, hi Darren, thank you very much. So a couple of points from me on that really. In terms of our recruitment, I would say we've got 5 scrutiny committees across the Clarion Housing Association, one for each region. And so we have you know, the capacity to engage a lot of residents in scrutiny of services, and they all scrutinize different subject areas. So we at Clarion can scrutinize up to sort of 5, maybe 6, 7, 8 service areas per year, which works really well for us as an organization. In terms of the people that we recruit, we do have a recruitment process for scrutiny, and that does involve an interview with the person that's made application to become a scrutiny member, because scrutiny does you know, take a lot of capacity from residents, both mentally and in physical timing. So it's really important that they understand right at the beginning what it is they're getting involved in. I would say that our members as a whole come from a variety of backgrounds, really. They might have been involved in previous activities, they might currently be involved in activities, or they might be fresh to scrutiny. And we very often, like you know, some of the colleagues on the call today have referred to, very often we find that residents who have seen that something is not working particularly well within our organisation, would like to know a bit more about scrutiny and how we operate, because they feel that they would like to be involved in making those changes and improving the services to all residents. So, I mean, we've recruited a lady who has just retired. She had a very strategic role. She's going to be a real asset to the committees, and she wants to carry on spending her time and keeping herself switched on to current issues within housing. She actually comes from a housing background. So you know, that people vary, I think, in terms of who wants to sign up and who want to join, and there could be various reasons for that. I think that you know, and we're learning more and more about that as time goes on, really. With regard to the meetings, I think COVID helped dramatically in terms of our demographic of residents that are engaged. We have been able to engage with far younger residents on our scrutiny committees, purely because we have the flexibility of the meetings being held online and people not having to travel for a long time to get to those meetings. And we do also hold our meetings in the evenings so that people who are working and may not be able to partake in any daytime activities are able to still attend. So I hope that's helpful.
Yeah, that is really helpful, Jan. Just coming back to you on a couple of things that you mentioned there. You said about the mix, about some people it's the first time, some people with a lot of experience. Do you think that mix of kind of skills and experience helps?
Oh, absolutely, dramatically. I mean, I know on my scrutiny committee in the East region, I have a business analyst. And that makes such a difference to other committee members that may not have been in that environment before, and it helps the independence of the scrutiny committee, because normally as you know, service leads, we would have to help scrutiny committees with analysis and things like that. We provide training that you know, we had a bespoke package developed by the housing quality network, specifically for Clarion, and we were able to discuss with them what it is we wanted in that training and what we didn't need to go into that training. So it was a bespoke package that was offered to all Scrutiny members, and you know, that helps more broadly with things like analysis. But if you've got someone, a business analyst or an ex-housing officer, then you know that they are going to bring so much more in terms of the different talents that we always that we have. So you've got strengths and weaknesses within it in any group of people that are meeting.
I'm going to ask you one more question, Jav, but it's really valuable. I'm aware Mary's waiting to come in as well, and so thanks for your patience, Mary. Just in relation to one other question, I'd welcome others if they could put it in the chat function if they've any experiences. Do you remunerate the members of the scrutiny panels for their involvement?
At this time, we don't. We're currently looking at incentives. I know that because I'm a member of the G15, I know that some members do, or some organisations do. Some moved away from it and have gone back to it. Some wouldn't touch it with a barge pole again. We have to be very, very cautious, because if we have residents who are in receipt of any sort of social funding, that can impact the money that they get to live in a day-to-day basis. So I think it's not easy to, I don't think you can just say, oh, I think we ought to be remunerating people for this, because there could be so many impacts on them as individuals. So it has to be looked at very, very clearly and very, very carefully.
Yeah, I'm aware of Salix, for instance. They got an award about a year or two ago for the customer committee, I think it's called, and they have, I think it's 11 or 12 people on their panel, and they're all remunerated on the same level as their board members.
Yeah,
that seems to have worked really well. I'm also aware of stories where it's really not been helpful. So I suppose it depends on where the organisation might be in their journey, as in terms of recruitment and getting people involved as well. So that's really, really helpful. Thank you. Mary, can I come to you, and then we'll go back to Paul. Thanks for your patience, Mary.
No, that's okay. I'm glad to follow Jan, because I've got so many questions. If I could fire some at her, that would be really helpful, because our resident forum is meeting in April and then in May to sort of almost redesign or reconfigure our engagement overall and scrutiny as well. So I was really interested in what everyone says, but with Jan, could I ask Jan if you talked about them being independent? Do they choose the topics that they scrutinise? Obviously, I think you said they produce the reports, and I wondered how Clarion take forward the recommendations and how easily they are sort of embedded or accepted, because one of the issues that I'm aware of is obviously staff nervousness and anxiety at what might come out of scrutiny. And I didn't know how Clarion, you know, if you did have to address some of those complexities in that. And also, just briefly, do you involve residents at a board level, or are the 5 groups across your geographical area, do they communicate with each other and form a sort of a hierarchy that they can then compare their experiences and take it further? Thank you.
Can I just come in there, Mary and Jan, just to say we're going to get onto some of those subjects.
Right.
So if for any reason you don't think we come back to it, please remind me. But I definitely intend for us to get back to those exact things.
You do. Sorry, thank you.
Yeah, if we can keep the focus at the moment just on recruitment. The last area that I was just going to ask about was about has anyone got any? Obviously, we've heard about how it's really useful to get to advertise widely, to get a mix of skills and things. Is there anybody that's got like a really good example that yielded lots of interest or applications to get involved in Scrutiny that they wanted to share? Oh, I think Barbara.
Hi, Darren. Yeah, I was trying to find my hand to raise it. I've just found it at the last minute. Sorry about that. Hi, good morning. I live in Minehead in Somerset, part of Live West, who have 39,000 homes all over the southwest, spread from, I think, Bristol, further away actually, down to the Isles of Scilly. I'm on the Scrutiny group, the Scrutiny panel for Live West, and what we have been doing is trying to go around our neighbourhoods, the certain members of the panel, because we might live in Exeter or Totnes or Minehead or Bristol or somewhere. And the other thing is, Live West have suggested to their housing officers or their scheme managers where the over 55s live, which they're presumably retired and have got lots of time to offer, suggested to residents when they go, oh, Live West have a Scrutiny panel, would you like to join? And from that, we're just about to roll out meetings. And I heard Jan say evening meetings as well as daytime meetings, and that's what the new way forward is going to be. Evenings and daytime meetings to introduce ourselves and themselves to us, the new members, and then split us up into groups, and hopefully going forward we'll have a bigger, better group than we've already got, a good size, but bigger and better. So housing officers and the existing residents on the group.
That's really helpful, Barbara. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm aware Paul's been very patient, so I'm going to just go back to Paul quickly. Then I think Jan says the legacy hand, then we'll go to Leslie, and then we'll move on to the next subject area. Paul.
Thanks, Darren. Just going back briefly to remuneration. The way we've structured our tenant involvement is that we have an elected panel of tenant reps who do receive a remuneration, a yearly remuneration, which covers, which is sufficient to show appreciation, but not enough to affect anybody's
Benefit entitlements.
Yes, yeah. There are then other panels that report to this who are not necessarily elected. They do not receive remuneration. So we've based our remuneration on whether or not you're elected. That was all. Okay,
so that's great, Paul. Thank you. That's really very helpful. I'm going to go to Leslie. Before I go to Leslie, I'm going to ask a question for people can put in the chat function if they. What is this? You can just put a number in. What do you think is a kind of an optimum number of members for a Scrutiny panel? That's something to put in the chat whilst Leslie's talking. Leslie.
Hi. One, I'd like to just kind of know how the tenants are elected. Are they elected by staff? Are they elected by other residents?
Oh, that's back to Paul.
Yeah.
Sorry, say again.
Oh, so
said,
Leslie was just
how are the elections
asking.
held? Are the elections held? Who votes on that?
The same organisation that handles the elections for the parish councillors and county councillors handle the election for the panelists, and this is advertised on various.
But who actually gets to vote? That's what I'm saying. Who gets to place their vote?
Any tenant within South Cambridgeshire District Council.
Okay. All right.
One vote per household.
Okay. That's just interesting. So I think, like Val said, most tenants, and I did my master's dissertational research was on why tenants get involved and why they stay involved. I think that, like Val said earlier, that most tenants get involved because of a particular issue. And I think that some of the best practice is that, you know, if someone is disgruntled, then, you know, there should be opportunities within an organization to kind of say, well, would you like, you know, to kind of, while they're kind of either have made a complaint or got the, you know, the fire in their belly, then you can kind of get them to see the kind of wider picture and actually recruit them from that. But the point is, and I know that Darren is going to continue on with the whole journey of scrutiny. Part of my research is why they stay involved. So most tenants get involved because they have a particular issue like repairs or something. They stay involved because they can see an impact of their output or their effort. And I think that is, for me, where a lot of organizations fall down, that, you know, what is the result of their energy and fire in their belly at the end of it? What has changed and what difference has it made? And I think a lot of tenants get apathetic and go, well, you know, I put all this energy in and then it doesn't kind of follow through. So, and I think that if other tenants within the organization are seeing that their voices are heard and that the impact is having an effect, you know, on the changes of services, then they can also be the kind of recruitment bees within, you know, their area, especially if it's a wider, you know, bigger organization that has, you know, many geographical areas. If you've got tenant champions and stuff that kind of say, look, they are listening, this is what's happened. And I know that when I was involved with Scrutiny, we published an annual report, that the Scrutiny group published an annual report on what we had done, what changes have been made, how it's being monitored. So there's a lot of hooks that, or processes that need to happen in order for Scrutiny to get the continued buy-in from residents.
That's great, Leslie. So clearly it shows about sort of in terms of retention and renewal, the importance of being able to make a difference to and therefore feel valued as a result of that, as a reason for you for wanting to stay involved, which leads quite nicely on to the next one about retention and renewal. I can see that there's been various differing numbers about typical sort of optimum numbers for people to get involved. I think one of the things that definitely comes through there is the need to have enough people to kind of share the workload. And then secondly, the need to sort of allow for a level of kind of dropout or attrition, because obviously people's circumstances can change. I can see that several people have made reference to kind of to allow for some dropout. So so just on that, and this we'll cover this one quite quickly. Have you experienced levels of attrition? What was the drivers of that? Does what we've just discussed chime with you around feeling valued as one of the main drivers for wanting to stay involved? I'm going to just check with Jan whether that's a legacy hand.
No, it's not.
Oh, Jan, you've been really patient. Thank you.
That's okay. I did drop it and then put it up again. So just a couple of points. In terms of the recommendations that each review encounters, they go to board. The recommendations go to our housing association board. Those outcomes are then tracked. And we have to provide a quarterly progress update to the board on you know what we've been doing. We have a single point of accountability which is associated to each review. So that's a business lead for each review that has to take the ownership of ensuring that the recommendations that have gone to board and been approved are then implemented or are being implemented, and that's what that tracker is all about. That then feeds back to our scrutiny committees at their meetings so that they can see the work that is being done. We also provide you said we did to the residents more generally to our involved residents in a sort of quarterly snapshot that we do, which then demonstrates what's happening within the business, and it's raising the profile of the scrutiny committee. The other thing I was going to talk about was, yeah, I think 12 is a good number. I think that helps to retain membership when they are able to see that what they are doing is making a difference. There was one last point, and you said about you know, what's worked well in recruiting. I don't know if this is going to work well yet, but we had on the 6th of March, we had a regional scrutiny away day where all our scrutiny committees came together, and we had the opportunity to recruit or procure a video firm, a videographer, and they came in and they've done a series of videos for us, and that will be for recruitment to resident involvement, that'll be recruitment to regional scrutiny, but we've also done like a 60-second video which we can use then on social media as well. So we're hoping that that's going to work really, really well for us. And it's certainly something, again, that promotes the importance of residents having a voice. And we can use it in so many different formats. So, yeah, I think that kind of covered. We also, because we had the away day, we couldn't, there were some residents who were working. So we followed that up with a digital event, which we held in an evening on the 14th of March. So it didn't exclude any members then from being involved in you know, that day. So
invaluable, and it's good to hear about the kind of the you said we did and the completion of the loops time and time again. That's always the, if it's not working well, there's usually, that is one of the big features where you see that tenants just feel like they gave something, but they're not getting the feedback on.
Yeah, and it's taken us a while to get there, Darren. You know, we've learned that actually we haven't done what we've needed to do in the past. So we are progressing it and evolving it so that we are trying to get things right.
So I'm going to go Val, then Paul, then Darren, and then I think we'll move on to the next area.
Hi, Darren. It was just something Jan said about, you said we did. It doesn't always work in housing because nowadays they still do not listen to residents. I think they still make decisions for us without us being involved in the decisions going forward. So it doesn't matter how, I mean, when we do scrutiny, we do the recommendations and then we give it to the head of service, they do the action plan, we then have a meeting to go through the action plan. But I think they just give us lip service about the action plan. They don't even try to put things in order to what the action plan says.
Val,
So,
I think you'll find that the new regulation is going to help with that for you. I think you will see a change.
yeah, but I still find that I think with residents, they need to see action, not just being passed the buck, saying, oh yeah, with the new legislation, oh, tick box, we've got residents involved, we've had their opinion, and then that's done. So yeah, that needs to change. We need to be involved in it from the beginning, not at the end, not halfway through.
Yeah, I think the message there really, Val, isn't it? It has to be meaningful,
yeah,
to demonstrate the difference. Paul, can I just come to you?
Thank you. Right, as far as I agree with Val entirely, but there's a bit of a circular argument here in that when we first started scrutiny, I can remember I joined at the tail end of a piece of scrutiny that was done, and the biggest observation, putting it politely, that the tenant reps were making was that none of the recommendations that they put forward were being acted upon. I have to say that since then, the district council have given us training. And I think in the past, what has happened is we may have arrived at an agreed course of action, but we're not speaking the same language as the professionals sitting on the other side of the fence. So we come up with a solution to a problem or a recommendation. We're not speaking in the same way. I'm glad to say that over the last couple of years, we have pushed for training sessions. So we are now able to talk in the same way and put our arguments forward in a way which is unarguably actionable, put it that way. So we are now getting more results, partly because we've been given the training. So once the organisation realises actually there is a benefit to training tenants, then things can move forward. But there's also one other thing. Sometimes the lack of results come about because the scrutiny panel or the area in which you're trying to analyse is too great. And I would suggest one of the best ways of approaching any form of scrutiny is to have a narrow area with a relatively small number of people involved in its scrutiny, so that the results that you come up with are unequivocal. If you pick too big an area and you have 12 people sitting around a table trying to scrutinise that big area, it takes an awful lot of effort to get everybody to even agree on a course of action. Whereas if you have an area which is relatively tight in the area of scrutiny is relatively tight, then you can actually come up with a course of action relatively quickly. And from that you can then build.
Yeah, that's a really useful insight, I think, and tip in terms of how we can maximise effectiveness, which we're going to go on to as the next bit. But before we do so, I'll just say two things. One, I'm putting some questions so that we get to cover a broader range of areas and everyone gets to have a chance to have an input whilst people are talking as well in the chat. So I'll put a question there in and I'll put some more as we go through. And then second, Darren, my namesake, thanks for your patience.
Might have been born at the same area of time. So I can second a lot what Jan is saying, because I'm on Clarion Housing Scrutiny Committee. I'm also involved, I got involved in the white paper for the government, so I'm involved in the panel as well. And I really got involved on the basis that I had so many critical complaints with regarding Clarion Housing, how they dealt with repairs, and I had damp issues, and I spoke to obviously other tenants that had complaints, and it got to a point that I didn't see enough action. So I got involved, and obviously I'm impressed actually where Clarion are concerned, because they are the biggest, one of the biggest housing associations in the UK. They are very organised within their area towards the scrutineers and the training that's involved. And also, I haven't been on the scrutiny for that long, but what I've seen so far has been very positive. As far as retaining people, I think that will always be a difficult one, because there is a lot of things to read, and involvement wise, you know, it can be quite time consuming. Even I found that more, to be honest, I'm getting more from the government side of things than at Clarion at the moment. But as we've just taken on a new topic, which we do get to choose, then obviously that will progress. But yeah, I've been impressed, and the away day that we did have that Jan mentioned was brilliant, where from the different regions we all got together, so it meant we could network, we could listen to other tenants and regional managers, what they had to say, and get some feedback from that. So yeah, it's a very good thing, but retention, I think, will always be a problem. I also don't think that 8 to 10, I think, is a good figure. If you get too large, there are too many people involved, and then you don't get the job done. As I say, I think smaller is always better. And that's my.
Thanks, Darren. That's really insightful. Thank you. Okay, I'll move things on. I'm aware of time, that we want to cover quite a lot of things. We're very ambitious, wasn't we, in terms of what we want to cover. Next, Eric, so in relation to just choosing your subjects, does anyone have any views about like how in your experience have you kind of chosen the subjects, and what level of support do you get in kind of operating the scrutiny? So I can see Leslie.
Hi. So when I was working in scrutiny, how we would choose is that we would look at complaints, we would look at the satisfaction survey, and see and have several topics, like the top 3 topics that are kind of rumbling around, and then look at particular areas of the business. Now, when I was working with scrutiny, it was working really, really well. And we would then consult the organization. So if it was to do with computer stuff, but they were just at that point in the next 6 months going to be having a computer, overhaul in their system, then we wouldn't actually do that. We would look at, the kind of next one on the topic. And then we would actually, in our away day, we would have an annual away day, do some brainstorming, and revisit the topics, like the top 5 or whatever, and see if anyone had a more priority. And we would try and plan out, once we got up and going, the next couple, in line. That's how we would develop the type of topics. But we also had an independent chair, so we weren't steered, by staff. So, for me, having an independent chair was key to kind of build that trust, as, we were absolutely independent, and then we reported directly to the governing board. So there was no kind of interference or watering down or kind of misdirection that happened.
Thanks, Leslie. That's covered quite a lot of points there, hasn't it? So both in terms of selection of areas, the use of an independent chairs operation. That does seem to be perhaps increasing in terms of the prevalence. Or if it's not a chair, having somebody who's an independent advisor. And I can see that Val has just highlighted that too. I think quite a number of organisations use that also. Val.
Yeah, thanks. We would go, sometimes we hear stuff on the ground from residents saying repairs is not working, heating's not working, grounds maintenance, stuff like that. But then we look at the KPIs as well. But also some staff managers come up to us and ask us to look at a service because they know it's not working. And they can identify where the problem areas are. So if you've got a big gas services and they say the contractor's not working, they're not performing, then we go and look at that. So it's a mixture of residents, KPIs, and what the staff asked us want to look at an emergency scrutiny. So it's a mixture.
Thanks, Val. That's helpful to know. Just for those that are unclear, KPIs refers to key performance indicators. So,
sorry.
No. We had a question on that, and just want to make sure everyone's aware. I can see that some people like the idea of a kind of a boot camp as well, a boot camp style, where we were talking in the chat. Brian, I'm going to come across to you.
The scrutiny group that I'm involved in, we are getting to choose the topic now we want to look at, and it in some ways it actually comes from previous scrutinies. we looked at an issue with damp and mold last year. And from that, we realized that while we were looking at that, there was an issue in relation to some of the correspondence that was going out. And rather than spend all the time during the issue with damp and mold, we then decided that we would, basically after Christmas, we decided then to pull out this correspondence and have a look at it. And we've done that, and we made a number of suggestions, which for some strange and unknown reason, every one of them has been accepted. Not only have they been accepted, but they've been done. And that was even before the report was even finished. Yeah. So it's progressing. And in addition to that, we also found that there was a certain issue to do with allocations in relation to people who needed equipment and adaptations, which was highlighted in the STAR survey that had been done, but also in the feedback that we were getting from some tenants. And the next one we're going to look at is, you know, when a property is allocated to somebody and you're aware that there is a need for something, be it a wet room or a handrail or support bars or all this sort of stuff. And we want to make sure that the allocations are being done, one, to properties that may already have the equipment in them, but two, that whatever needs to be done is done before a tenant moves in. As most people would be aware, if you're going to install a wet room in a property, it's a week's work. You don't want to be putting a tenant into a property and then saying, by the way, you have no bathroom for a week. So we want to ensure that there's joined up thinking on that one, and that where you've got a tenant who has that issue or has that problem, or who has had an occupational assessment carried out, that the work required for that is done before they move into the property. It may take an extra week before they can move in, but it's better to take an extra week rather than upset a new tenant by taking their kitchen out or taking their bathroom out or whatever when they moved in. But yeah, we're getting more of a, it might be my bullheadedness, but we're getting more of an opportunity to actually pick what we want to do now.
So thanks, Brian. I mean, really what that shows is that the importance of the panel itself having a degree of autonomy to be able to focus on the areas. And in order to do that, then they need a range of information, don't they, in order to be able to triangulate and identify which of the particular areas they want to focus on. So they're bringing their own experience, and they're bringing use of data as well, and to focus on that. I saw Amanda had her hand up and it's gone back down, but I realised you haven't had the chance to speak, Amanda. So
yeah, okay. Well, I was just going to was it David who just spoke?
Brian, I think.
Brian. Okay, Brian. Yeah. Don't the local authorities fund aids and adaptions? Or...
There are two separate funds. There's one which is comes through from the Department of Levelling Up, which is basically in a lot of cases for private properties. So if you own your own property and you want or have to have work done, you then you can apply for a grant, which is up to £30,000, I think. But within some local authorities, and certainly within Air Almo, you're not eligible for that grant.
If you're occupational therapist,
yeah, so, I mean, disabled facilities grants kind of like a little bit off topic, but like maybe that's something we can come back to in the future.
But they pay for the wet rooms and the adaptions.
In some, I think eligibility and things like that is quite a complex area, Amanda. I think generally speaking, there's local authorities have a duty to cover some of those things, and will have that. But in some areas, it can differ because the landlord themselves are going to pick that up.
Yeah. Okay.
So I think Darren is there to come in on something again. Yep. Darren.
Yeah, so as far as choosing the subject, and Jan, I see has made note of this, I think we are supposed to go and choose them. I don't know how that's done because I haven't seen it so far, apart from the latest subject that we have seemed to have got against what I would have wanted was pushed by the Housing Ombudsman. So we, this time, I don't feel chose our subject because the Housing Ombudsman is bringing in all sorts of new legislation, etc. And I think Clarion decided, or our team has decided, that we are going with what the Housing Ombudsman is trying to push at this moment in time. So I'm still to see us choose a subject. But Jan says that's what we're supposed to do. So I'm still to see that.
So obviously there's some variability there, isn't there, amongst providers as to whether it's the landlord pushing or whether it's the autonomy of the individual groups. Another question I'd ask to have a think about, if we're talking about autonomy, is whether the panels have their own budgets as well. I know that there are some panels that have their own budgets where they can kind of pay for, say, independent support or training or do additional things. So maybe that's something you could put in the chat if you're aware, if there's individual kind of budgets for you to have control of. Paul.
Thank you. Going back to the gentleman who mentioned the Housing Ombudsman, we're actually using the Housing Ombudsman's latest guidelines include having a tenant survey each year. And basically, we've gone on the premise that the areas that are the lowest performing, as shown by the data come back from the tenant survey, are the areas that we'll aim for scrutiny.
Yeah, I think there's a number of approaches on there that can be taken, and clearly there's kind of bigger agenda issues. Then there's the individual experience. Then there's the performance information. I think what your message there earlier was don't bite off more than you can chew, and make sure that it's in manageable chunks, so that you can make sure that your focus is going to result in meaningful recommendations that can be monitored, followed up, and make sure that they'll be taken on board and result in change from the landlord. I'm going to check whether Leslie's got, is that a legacy hand from Leslie?
I don't remember, but I was just typing something in the chat. I'd be interested to hear about staff support, because we're like talking about training and budgets and stuff, but like staff support as in, you know, is there someone that is there that takes minutes and then types up stuff, that someone that a staff member that is your go-to person? I know that when I was involved in Scrutiny before a lot of the budget cuts, that, you know, we had an overall person, but then we had a devoted person to, like a staff member to Scrutiny, that would provide us as an intermediary between the organization, you know, to kind of set up interviews and all that stuff. So the actual Scrutiny panel wasn't doing that. The Scrutiny panel would say, okay, we want to interview XYZ, and then they would kind of set all that up. So I'm kind of wondering what internal support, in addition to, you know, budgetary funding for training or whatever, is provided. I mean, you can put that in the chat too.
Yeah, thanks, Leslie. I can see definitely Val's already put in about the level of support that they're getting from the team. I know Val's at PA Housing, so I guess generally speaking, from what we've heard from some of the other organisations as well, it would look like that there is a degree of ongoing support and from staff, which is, I'd hesitate to say essential, unless somebody puts in the chat something addition. I want to move on just a little bit to the next area. So we've got about 20 minutes left. And that is the role of scrutiny within the kind of broader range of tenant involvement activities. So for some organizations, scrutiny might be the only thing that there is for kind of tenant engagement, but others, it might be part of a really broad network of different areas. And I've seen examples where it's at both ends of the spectrum. So I guess my question to open up is, in your experience, does the scrutiny committee link in with other tenant involvement activities across your organisation, and does that work? What sort of advantages does that bring to the work of the scrutiny committee themselves? So I'm going to take it in reverse order, actually, just so that we kind of mix it up with it. Barbara, you come in. Barbara.
Hi, that was quick, unexpected. Thank you. We have a core group of about 40 members, and I'm in the In Focus scrutiny group, which there's about 10 of us. So the other 30 do other things, as you've just said. We don't tend to overlap, but we do all use the Yammer platform. And it's split into different areas where the procurement team or the estate champions who monitor all the garden maintenance, etc. So there's quite a few teams. Going forward, like I've just put in the chat room, I believe that going forward and as extending this, this group will be more than 40, and we'll all be split up, and then we can take time out, and I can say, oh, I want to go into procurement and then come back. I think it's a trial period. I think it's good because it gives you a roundabout kind of more experience. I must say, I've been on scrutiny for 3 years and it is my favourite thing. And Darren, I've only caught up with the TAROE Trust recently because I'm on the Stop Social Housing Stigma group. Okay. As part of Live West, but it's a personal thing. You're absolutely amazing. I've looked at your videos. I'm not stalking you, but you're really current, and I'm hopefully going to be invited to come to more meetings because, yeah, I agree with everything that you're doing. Yeah.
Oh, thank you.
So thank you,
Barbara. That's lovely. It's always nice to see you.
Well, you like a fresh face and new, current and up-to-date ideas. And the one thing I would like to say, which is I bang about all the time, allocations and local governments and housings and how they do it, because it does upset the apple cart in established, but that isn't what we're talking about today. But yeah, so thank you, Darren, for coming along.
Thanks very much. Just so these are all free for tenants, so you're welcome to come along if you're not on our news. So hopefully you can just continue to get involved, and you've not signed up to our newsletter, then do so. Then you'll get updates about any of the events that we're running.
Already did it last week. Thank you.
Oh, brilliant! Thank you. Okay, go to Paul and then Jan. Oh, Paul, you're muted.
I think you said Jan next.
Oh, okay. Sorry, Jan, are you okay to come in?
Yeah, that's fine, Darren. Okay, so in terms of the scrutiny committee linking to other groups, the scrutiny committee will use Clarion Voice email, which is a bank of kind of over 700 residents, where we will run certain elements of the review past those residents to gain a broader view of their experience of that particular area of the service, or they will ask them to review certain documents that might be pertaining to that review. It also links to our National Property Engagement Group. That's one of our national groups, and it links to the Complaint Special Project Group, in as much that following a review of complaints, lessons learned, and a review of involving residents in Housing Ombudsman's complaint self-assessment, the Scrutiny Committee actually recommended that a complaint special project group should be set up. So that has had an invaluable outcome, because they've been able to further their review by looking at other elements. So yeah, that was just to give you a highlight of how they do all link together.
Thanks, Jan. I think what it demonstrates as well is the importance of being able to share the workload and also have a different perspectives and focus to be brought in. I'm aware, I was reading last night about Salix homes have a scrutiny pool where they can kind of ask other people to get involved when doing, like, say, tenant inspections and things like that, which seems a good idea. Paul, I'll come back to you now.
Thank you. Two links here, really. First off, I was at another event through TPAS up in Birmingham last summer. And one of the things that somebody came up with, which I thought was a really great idea, and we're now pushing for this with our group, is that when there's been tenant involvement, whether it's in scrutiny or selecting, being on selection panels for contracts, or even employing people, that needs to have, we need to have some way of ensuring that everybody understands there's been tenant involvement. And there was, and I can't remember which organisation it was, but one organisation at this conference actually had a form of stamp that they placed on every single thing where there'd been tenant involvement. There was like a stamp on the bottom right-hand corner of that page that said, you know, we agree with this. And I thought that was an absolutely brilliant idea, because it does two things. One, it shows other people that actually being involved can have an effect. There is input. And two, going back to what was mentioned earlier on, the people who are involved actually get recognized, not individually, but they get recognized as, oh, I got involved in that. Now, the second thing, the second strand, when you go back to when you were saying what else do people who are involved with scrutiny involved with, we had a really interesting, the last 18 months has been a really interesting time for us, because we've been involved as tenants, we've been involved in the committee or the panel that sat in on the presentation of the various bidders for our maintenance contract. So alongside our officers, it was about 8 or 10 meetings we had where we were actually marking the offers given by various contractors. So at the end of the day, we had input into which maintenance contractor was awarded the contract for maintaining the housing stock. The beauty of this was, of course, we then had their offer in writing, their contractual obligations. So we now have that information, and right the way through their contract, we can point to page 86, page 45, page 14, where they have stated this is what they're going to do. The empowerment that that's given us means that once again, we're now able to talk in the language they understand. So it's been a double advantage.
Yeah, I think, Paul, the other thing which it shows the value of tenants being involved in procurement, shows the value of tenants having information, and then it also shows that if you're part of the process, that also has an effect on the kind of the bidders and things, saying, well, actually, we know that we need to appeal to tenants.
But it gets better than that, because what we realised was, between the elected officials, the county councillors, the officers in South Cambs and ourselves, our scoring wasn't that much different.
Mhm.
And in fact, the outliers were usually the county councillors.
Yeah.
And-
There was a piece of research a few years ago called An Investment Not a Cost, which showed the value of involving tenants in those kind of decisions. And it said the same sort of thing.
But it rolled on from there. This is the point I was coming to. The benefit of that was when we had two people who, or two posts that came up. One was for the manager of the contract within the district council. And then later on, we had a liaison officer post come up, a tenant liaison officer. Now, initially, the tenant liaison officer, we were given an equal say on the panel for the contracts manager. When it came to the tenant participation officer, the tenants on the panel outnumbered the councillors.
Mhm.
Our argument was, well, you can see from past experience that our decision making is not that much different from yours. And as a tenant participation officer is going to be someone that we are going to have to deal with, then we should have a bigger say in who it is that is selected. And it was agreed, and that person is now in place.
Yeah, thank you. So we're of time, so I'm going to push on a little bit. I'll just say I'm putting a couple of questions in the chat. Another one was about preparing reports and whether it's always a report or whether you a presentation, some different ones. So please have if you've got anything to add to that, put that in the chat function. That would be great. I want us to be able to get onto kind of impact and things as well. So just before we do that, just to say about rights of audience, we've already heard about organisations having the option to get into to report direct into the board and to have that right of audience with the board, which is ultimately responsible for the decision making. Are there others experience that either do that or really don't, and that creates a barrier? I guess both sides of the coin there on that. And then whilst you're having to think of that, then I'll move on just to say another area where you might want to contribute is about having an impact. So we've heard already quite a bit about the importance of monitoring recommendations that are made, being able to have a role in kind of reporting back to say what has been done and what hasn't. So there's the kind of the follow-on accountability, which is different than scrutiny, as I think David's put in the chat, but does complete a loop there on accountability for delivering on the actions that have been agreed following the recommendations made. Does anyone have like a real success story where it made a real difference as a result of the scrutiny activities as well? So I'll go to Brian and then Val.
In relation to the reporting, we have, because it's an Almo, we had slight difficulty in that the senior management team don't like us talking to the board. But that can be circumvented, and we've managed to do it in that our landlord is the council, and I've certainly over the last number of months, and it happened because of the damp and mold issue. We've always had a liaison group with the landlord, but there's more direct contact now with the landlord, and it was quite funny. We had an away day that was organised by the engagement team in the Almo this week actually, and something unexpected happened because I invited the landlord to attend, and the landlord informed the engagement team that they were coming along to the meeting, and nobody, well, they know now, but they didn't know as to how the landlord knew that this meeting was even taking place. because they hadn't told them. So there are ways of doing it, and there's been a lot of cooperation certainly between the Scrutiny, who are monitoring what's going on with the damp and mold task group, and the landlord. And for some reason, the landlord or the Almo are getting really nervous because both the tenants and the landlord are not happy with the results and the information being provided, and have highlighted quite a few issues. So there is ways around it, and Scrutiny reports are actually going, a copy of them is going to the landlord, as well as the senior management team within the Almo. But the landlord can now directly see, because that bond, that communication is there, which is not something that the Almo necessarily wants, but they have to swallow it because if you want to put it a better way, their paymasters have now told them they have to do it. But it was, yeah, there was a slight panic mode when the landlord decided they were attending this get together of a tenant voice and scrutiny group in a away day, and it proved quite interesting. There was a lot of questions being asked by the landlord, which were very, very similar to the questions that tenants have been asking for quite a while.
Yeah, so thanks, Brian. I think what it shows a couple of things there, doesn't it? I think we need to remember the importance that there are different organisational structures, especially between local authorities and housing associations in the way that they work and are governed. So, but that ultimately, I think the message is the same: is the ones who are making the decisions need to be the ones that are receiving the recommendations for it to have maximum effect. Val.
Sorry. Yeah, one of you saying, Darren, about some good news sort of thing through Scrutiny. We actually managed to get one, like a handyman service out of one of the scrutinies that we did, because we felt that residents needed that, because if they're on their own, they wouldn't be able to put shelves up. They needed grab rails. Instead of getting the contractors out, the handyman would go out and do it, because they get every resident gets an hour at a time. So if there's any jobs that need doing, the handyman would be sent and they would do it free of charge. So it was a good way of people living longer. They're going to need, if they're on their own, more and more jobs doing. So I thought that was a good outcome of the scrutiny.
Yeah. So I'm aware of time, so we're going to sort of move to wrapping up. Just kind of one final area I was going to look at is about kind of almost like critical analysis, I suppose, of scrutiny. Clearly, what we've heard today is that there are a whole range of positive areas where scrutiny is able to have an impact. It provides a good source through which tenants can come together collectively, can review services, can make recommendations for change. One of the things, like more general trends that we've experienced as an organisation, is over the last decade where we've seen what are large landlord established scrutiny panels is that those are kind of set up, funded and administered as part of the landlord organisation. At the same time, we've seen kind of a demise and a reduction of independent tenants associations. Now, they're not necessarily mutually exclusive, because I've seen examples where sometimes it's the tenant associate, independent organisations can also fulfil scrutiny functions if that's acknowledged. But generally speaking, has anyone had an experience where they maybe were involved in sort of independent tenant associations and they've kind of gone by the wayside as a result, or is that not such an issue in your experience?
Sorry, Darren, when you say tenants associate, do you mean what we're talking about, the scrutiny?
So tenant scrutiny is generally set up as a body which is by the landlord, serviced, recognised, funded by. Tenant associations are often entirely separate, independent to a tenant, to a landlord. Maybe a group of residents, they come together, set up, their own constitution, maybe with like maybe a block of flats or shelter scheme, or just so many streets. Let's just come together. They maybe have a meeting room in a community centre, and they meet and review things. We've seen quite a reduction in those types of organizations in recent years, and I just didn't know, are the two linked? Some people say that they maybe are, because they previously were funded by a landlord and not now, but
yeah,
might not be in your experience. So
can I carry on?
Yeah, please do. Yeah.
About 20 years ago, my husband and I and friends of ours across the road, our estate was relatively new, and it had a lot of antisocial behaviour, and we didn't know where to go. So I approached Live West and the local police station, and they got together, and we had the local councillor, and it's a multi-landlorded estate, so the newer landlord, which were Magna, and they all came together and found a pot of money, and we set up with a constitution and committee members, and I think we had, and the police. We had one of our local play areas, we had £21,000 funded by Children in Need, and refurbished it all. Everything was done with the children. On the back of that, we had the Dream Scheme, which was for the 8 to 16-year-olds. A lady called Kate King in Sheffield started it. And the children would do tasks. They'd get rewards in monetary value, and then they'd choose how to spend it collectively. They'd go off on day trips to Butlins or somewhere. The two of them went hand in hand and were absolutely amazing. But about 10 years ago, the younger members of whoever was helping, mainly the police, they went off and got pregnant, and they were trying to hand the reins to me, who I'm a volunteer, a community leader here in Minehead, and I have no concept of paperwork, of like banking, etc., on that scale. So I had to decline, and because I declined, nobody else wanted to do it, because they all felt, oh, well, Barbara can't do it, we can't do it. So to cut a long story short, we all got a little bit older, but while it was active, it was amazing, and all of the authorities came together, and then it disbanded, and then the house where we live got really bad with antisocial behaviour again, and recently we've set up another group. We're all older and wiser. It's the police again, the local youth club. There's a pot of money, and we have our own little committee, and we're doing it again for the newer children, because they're getting bored and all this new. So in the last 20 years, technology's come along, and we've all benefited, children and adults. That's why we're talking today. And yeah, we would like to set up a tenants association, but Live West is so big and so sporadic. There are 3 ladies from Live West, and we don't know where to go, how to do it. So I don't think it'll ever come off, because so we're just going to stay in the scrutiny. But we did talk about it, but I think the housing associations would have to be smaller in a set area, and then a tenant association would thrive. Yeah, so that's my input.
Yeah, we've definitely seen it, that alongside the kind of more general movement in the sector to much larger organisations as they've been merging over time. Maybe that's a conversation we could have for another day, Barbara, over setting up smaller scale tenant associations. I'm aware that we've reached the end in terms of time. I'd like to say a really big thank you to everybody who's contributed so much to today. There's loads of information, and I'm going to try to bring it all together into a report which we'll share with everybody who's been here today. So we've got a record of your details so that we can send that on. We'll publish it more generally as well. In the meantime, I'll send some follow-up information from today to everybody who's attended, which includes just a list of the questions as well that I put together in advance. If you wanted to send anything in, especially over the next week or two, then you're very welcome to do so, and I'll put further details in the follow-up email. In the meantime, a really big thank you to everybody for taking part today. I hope that you found it valuable as well. Yeah, until we have our next session, further details will be announced. So thanks very much, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you, Darren.
Good to see you all.